The stagecoach rattled violently as it hit another rut in the dusty road, jolting Zara Matthews awake with a start. Her gloved hands clutched the worn leather journal in her lap, the only connection she had to her future husband waiting in Silver Creek, Colorado. The year was 1876, and at 22, Zara was traveling west to marry a man she knew only through 6 months of correspondence. "Not much longer now, miss," the driver called down. "Silver Creek's just beyond that mountain pass." Zara nodded, though he couldn't see her, and tried to swallow past the dryness in her throat. The vast landscape of the Colorado Territory spread before her, wild and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Since leaving Boston 2 weeks ago, she'd crossed more distance than she'd traveled in her entire life. Her parents' passing had left her with little choice but to accept Edward Fleming's proposal, a well-established rancher who needed a wife and offered security, if not love. The stagecoach groaned to a halt at a small outpost nestled in a valley. "Changing horses," the driver announced. 15 minutes if you need to stretch your legs." Zara stepped down carefully, her navy blue traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of dust. The small trading post was little more than a wooden structure with a stable attached, yet it represented the last stop before her new life would begin. She walked to a water trough, splashing cool water on her face and neck. When she turned, she nearly collided with a tall figure. "Pardon me, madam," came a deep voice as strong hands steadied her shoulders. Zara looked up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a worn Stetson hat. The man before her embodied everything she'd imagined of the West: tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that spoke of a life lived outdoors. "No harm done," she managed, stepping back slightly. "You're a long way from home," he observed, his eyes taking in her Eastern clothing and delicate features. "Is it that obvious?" Zara attempted a smile, pushing a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Boston or Philadelphia?" he asked with a slight smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Boston," she admitted. "How did you know?" "Your boots. Too fine for the frontier." He nodded toward her feet. "I'm Wyatt Thornton. Zara Matthews." He touched the brim of his hat. "Pleasure, Miss Matthews. What brings you to these parts?" Before she could answer, the stagecoach driver called, "All aboard! Next stop, Silver Creek." "That's my cue," she said, gathering her skirts. "Silver Creek?" Wyatt's expression shifted slightly. "That's where I'm headed to. You're not riding the stage?" He gestured toward a magnificent chestnut horse tethered nearby. "I prefer my own company on the trail." Impulsively, Zara asked, "Is it much farther?" "About 3 hours by stage, but there's a storm brewing over those mountains." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Stage might not make it through today." The driver called again, more insistently. "I should go," Zara said, hurrying toward the coach. Wyatt nodded, but as she climbed in, he added, "If you get stuck at Widow Carson's place up ahead, tell her Wyatt sent you. She'll treat you right." The stage lurched forward before Zara could respond. She watched through the window as Wyatt mounted his horse with fluid grace, tipping his hat once more before turning in the opposite direction. An hour later, Zara understood Wyatt's warning. The sky had darkened to a threatening gray, and the wind howled around the stagecoach. Fat raindrops began to splatter against the windows. "We're stopping at Carson's," the driver shouted over the growing storm. "Can't make it through the pass in this weather." By the time they reached the small roadhouse, rain was coming down in sheets. A gray-haired woman hurried out with a large umbrella, ushering Zara inside while the driver tended to the horses. "Widow Carson?" Zara asked, dripping onto the wooden floor. "That's me," the woman confirmed. "Storm caught you, did it? You'll stay the night. Wyatt said you'd be kind enough to take me in." The woman's weathered face brightened. "Wyatt Thornton? You know that boy? We met briefly at the last stop," Zara explained. "He mentioned your place. Well, any friend of Wyatt's is welcome here. Let's get you dried off." The roadhouse was simple but clean, with 4 guest rooms upstairs and a common dining area. After changing into dry clothes, Zara joined Mrs. Carson in the kitchen, grateful for the warmth of the cooking stove. "So what brings you to Silver Creek?" Mrs. Carson asked as she kneaded bread dough. "I'm to be married," Zara replied, the words still feeling strange on her tongue. "To Mr. Edward Fleming." Mrs. Carson's hands stilled momentarily. "Edward Fleming? The rancher?" "Yes." "Do you know him?" The older woman resumed her kneading. "Everyone knows everyone in these parts. Fleming's got the biggest spread in the county." "What? What's he like?" Zara ventured, realizing she'd never asked anyone this question before. Mrs. Carson seemed to choose her words carefully. "He's respected. Built that ranch from nothing. Must be near 50 now, I reckon." Zara tried to mask her surprise. Edward had never mentioned his age in his letters, and she'd imagined someone perhaps in his 30s. "I see," she said quietly. "How'd you come to be engaged to a man you've never met?" Mrs. Carson asked, her tone gentle rather than judgmental. Zara explained about her parents passing from influenza, the dwindling family finances, and Edward's advertisement seeking a bride. His letters were kind. She finished lamely. Mrs. Carson nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "The West needs good women. And you look like you've got a strong spirit. You'll need it out here." Later that evening, as the storm continued to rage outside, the door burst open, bringing in a gust of wind and rain and Wyatt Thornton. "Thought you were headed away from Silver Creek," Mrs. Carson said, helping him remove his dripping coat. "Changed my mind when I saw that storm front," he replied, shaking water from his hat. His eyes found Zara by the fire. "Miss Matthews. Looks like my warning came true." "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged, inexplicably pleased to see him again. After he dried off and changed, Wyatt joined Zara and 2 other stranded travelers for dinner. Throughout the meal, Zara found herself drawn to his stories of life in the West, tales of cattle drives, encounters with native tribes, and the harsh beauty of the frontier. "And what awaits you in Silver Creek?" he asked finally, his eyes holding hers across the table. "I'm to be married," she said, watching his expression carefully. Something flickered in his eyes. "Lucky man," he said simply. "Who's the groom?" "Edward Fleming." Wyatt's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Fleming? From the Double F Ranch?" "Yes." "Do you know him?" He set his fork down slowly. "Our paths have crossed. Mr. Thornton," she pressed, "if you know something about my future husband, I'd appreciate hearing it." Wyatt considered her for a long moment. "Fleming's wealthy, powerful. Built that ranch with his own 2 hands, they say." "But?" Zara prompted, sensing his hesitation. "But he's a hard man, Miss Matthews. Drives his ranch hands something fierce." "3 wives he's had, 3? Zara interrupted, her heart sinking. Edward had mentioned being a widower once, but not 3 times. First died in childbirth with the baby. Second left him, went back east. Third. He paused. "Well, they say she fell from her horse. Bad accident." Zara felt cold despite the fire's warmth. "I see. I shouldn't have spoken," Wyatt said, regret in his voice. "It's not my place." "No," she said firmly. "I appreciate your honesty. I'd rather know what I'm walking into." After dinner, while the others retired, Zara found herself alone with Wyatt on the small covered porch, listening to the rain. "Why are you going to Silver Creek?" she asked. "You never said." Wyatt leaned against the porch railing. "I used to work at the Double F," he said quietly. "Left 3 years ago. Now I've got a small spread of my own north of town." "You worked for Edward?" He nodded. "For 5 years. Started as a ranch hand, worked up to foreman." "Why did you leave?" His jaw tightened. "Differences of opinion on how men should be treated." After a pause, he added, "And how women should be treated too." Zara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled. I have to go through with this, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I have nowhere else to go. There's always a choice, Miss Matthews. Is there? She met his gaze. I'm alone in the world, Mr. Thornton. My parents are dead, our home and possessions sold to pay debts. Edward Fleming offers security, a home. At what price? He asked gently. Zara had no answer. They stood in silence for several minutes before she bid him good night. Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed in the night. As Zara prepared to board the stagecoach for the final leg of her journey, Wyatt approached, leading his horse. I thought you'd be gone already, she said. Thought I'd ride alongside the stage, he replied. If you don't mind the company. The driver called for passengers to board. Zara hesitated, then impulsively reached out to touch Wyatt's arm. Thank you, she said softly. For the truth. He covered her hand with his. When we reach Silver Creek, if you ever need help, any kind of help, my place is just north of town. Ask anyone for the rocking tea. She nodded, then climbed into the stage. As they set off, she watched Wyatt riding alongside, strong and straight in the saddle, his face set towards Silver Creek. The town appeared first as a collection of wooden structures nestled in a wide valley, with mountains rising beyond. As the stagecoach rolled down the main street, Zara took in the general store, saloon, church, and various businesses that comprised Silver Creek. Despite its small size, the town had an air of prosperity about it. The stage halted in front of the Silver Creek Hotel. Zara stepped down, looking around nervously for Edward Fleming. Miss Matthews? A thin man in a dark suit approached. I'm Albert Knowles, Mr. Fleming's attorney. He's sent me to collect you and your belongings. Oh. Zara couldn't hide her disappointment. Mr. Fleming isn't coming himself? Business at the ranch required his attention. The buggy's this way. As her trunk was loaded onto a smart-looking buggy, Zara glanced around for Wyatt but saw no sign of him. With a sigh, she allowed Mr. Knowles to help her up. How far is the ranch? She asked as they set off. About 5 miles south of town, Knowles replied. Finest property in the county. And Mr. Fleming? What can you tell me about him? Knowles gave her a sidelong glance. Mr. Fleming is a highly respected businessman. You're fortunate to have caught his interest. They rode in silence after that, Zara watching the landscape change from town to open country. Finally, they passed under an imposing wooden arch bearing the double F brand. The ranch house itself was the largest Zara had ever seen, a 2-story structure of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around it. Several outbuildings, barns, and corrals sprawled nearby, with cowboys moving purposefully about their tasks. As the buggy stopped at the front steps, the door opened, and Edward Fleming emerged. Zara's first impression was of a tall, imposing figure, a man in his early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and a precisely trimmed beard. His clothing was expensive but practical, and his bearing spoke of authority accustomed to being obeyed. Miss Matthews, he said, his voice deep and controlled. Welcome to the Double F. Mr. Fleming, she responded, allowing him to assist her down from the buggy. His hands were large and rough against hers, his grip firm. I trust your journey was satisfactory, he said, not quite a question. It was. Educational, she replied carefully. The storm delayed us last night. At Carson's place, I presume? I received word this morning. He guided her up the steps. Come inside. Mrs. Porter has prepared refreshments. The interior of the ranch house was as impressive as its exterior, well furnished with heavy wooden pieces, quality carpets, and evidence of wealth throughout. A stern-faced housekeeper waited in the parlor with a tea service. Mrs. Porter, this is Miss Matthews, my intended, Edward announced. She'll be mistress of the house after Saturday's ceremony. Saturday? Zara couldn't hide her surprise. But that's only 3 days away. Edward's expression didn't change. The minister is available, and I see no reason to delay. Unless you object? Put on the spot, Zara shook her head. No, of course not. It's just. Very soon. Excellent. Mrs. Porter will show you to your room. I have business to attend to, but we'll dine together at 6. With a curt nod, he was gone, leaving Zara alone with the housekeeper. Her room was large and well appointed, with a 4-poster bed, writing desk, and a window overlooking the mountains to the north. Once alone, Zara sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the finality of her situation. That evening at dinner, she attempted to engage Edward in conversation, hoping to discover some warmth beneath his businesslike exterior. "Tell me about your family," she ventured after the soup course. "My parents came west in '42, he replied. "Father died in '51 during a Ute raid. Mother followed a year later. No siblings." "I'm sorry to hear that," Zara said sincerely. "My parents are both gone too. It's difficult being alone." Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "Then you understand the practical nature of our arrangement. I need a wife to manage the household, provide heirs, and serve as hostess when necessary. You need security and position. It's a fair exchange." Zara nodded, though her heart sank at his clinical assessment. "Your lawyer mentioned you're well respected in the community. I built this ranch from nothing," he said, pride evident in his voice. 200 head of cattle my first year. Now I run over 5,000, with 30 men on payroll. That's impressive," she acknowledged. "I've worked for everything I have," he continued, "and I protect what's mine." Something in his tone made Zara glance up sharply, but his expression remained impassive. The next morning, Zara was introduced to the routine of the ranch. Edward was gone before breakfast, leaving her to explore the house with Mrs. Porter as a reluctant guide. "Mr. Fleming prefers order," the housekeeper explained repeatedly as she outlined Zara's responsibilities. "The previous Mrs. Fleming found it difficult to adapt to his expectations." "Which Mrs. Fleming would that be?" Zara asked pointedly. "Mrs. Porter's mouth tightened. "It's not my place to discuss such matters." By afternoon, feeling suffocated within the house, Zara ventured outside. A young ranch hand was working with a horse in a nearby corral. "Good afternoon," she called, approaching the fence. The cowboy touched his hat respectfully. "Afternoon, madam. You must be Miss Matthews." "I am." "And you are?" "Tommy Wilson, madam. I handle most of the breaking and training." Zara watched as he worked with the spirited bay horse. "You're very good with him." Tommy smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen since arriving. "This one's got spirit but a good heart. Just needs understanding, not force." "That's true of most creatures, I think," Zara replied. "Tommy!" Edward's voice cut through their conversation like a whip. He strode toward them, his face dark with displeasure. "Back to work. That horse should have been saddle broke yesterday." "Yes, sir," Tommy muttered, turning back to the horse. Edward took Zara's arm firmly. "The corrals are no place for a lady. The men need to focus on their work. I was just getting some fresh air," she protested as he led her toward the house. "There's the garden if you need air," he replied. "I won't have my future wife gossiping with the hands." That evening, a buggy arrived carrying Reverend and Mrs. Simmons for dinner. The minister was a thin, scholarly man who seemed cowed by Edward's presence, while his wife was a nervous, fluttering woman who spoke only when addressed directly. "We're so pleased you've come to join our community, Miss Matthews," Reverend Simmons offered during dinner. "A good Christian woman is always welcome in Silver Creek." "Thank you, Reverend," Zara replied. "I look forward to attending your services." "The wedding will be at 2 on Saturday," Edward announced. "Small affair, just the necessary witnesses." "But," Zara began, then caught herself. "I thought perhaps we might invite more of the community. To meet people." Edward's gaze was cool. "There will be time for socializing after we're settled. I prefer to keep personal matters private." Later, as they said goodbye to their guests, Mrs. Simmons pressed a small Bible into Zara's hands. For strength, my dear, she whispered, something like sympathy in her eyes. The following day, Zara woke with a sense of desperation. In less than 48 hours, she would be Mrs. Edward Fleming, bound to this man and this place forever. The thought filled her with dread. After breakfast, she asked, "Might I go into town today? I'd like to purchase a few things for the wedding." Edward considered her request. "I suppose that's reasonable. I'll have Jenkins drive you." An hour later, Zara found herself in Silver Creek, ostensibly to shop but really seeking a moment to breathe away from the oppressive atmosphere of the ranch. Jenkins, the driver, was clearly under instructions not to let her out of his sight. At the general store, she selected a few ribbons and handkerchiefs while Jenkins waited outside. The proprietor, a friendly woman named Mrs. Baxter, chatted amiably. "You must be Edward Fleming's new bride," she said. "News travels fast in small towns." "Yes, the wedding is tomorrow," Zara confirmed. Mrs. Baxter's smile dimmed slightly. "Well, congratulations. The Double F is the finest property around." "You've known Mr. Fleming long?" Zara asked casually. "Since he first came to Silver Creek. He's been a prominent figure in the community." She hesitated. "Miss Matthews, forgive my forwardness, but are you certain about this marriage?" Zara stared at her, startled by the direct question. Why do you ask?" Mrs. Baxter glanced toward the door to ensure Jenkins wasn't within earshot. "Mr. Fleming has a reputation for being hard on those under his authority. His previous wives." She trailed off. "Please," Zara urged quietly. "I need to know." The shopkeeper sighed. "His first wife died in childbirth. That was tragic but not uncommon. The second left after less than a year, fled back east with bruises that couldn't be explained by household accidents. The third." She lowered her voice further. "Elizabeth was a lovely woman, high-spirited. They say she fell from her horse, but Doc Henderson told my husband he'd never seen injuries like that from a simple fall." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. "Are you saying he—" "I'm not saying anything definite," Mrs. Baxter interrupted quickly. "Just that. Be careful, my dear. Very careful." When they returned to the ranch, Zara was surprised to see a familiar figure speaking with one of the ranch hands near the barn. "Wyatt Thornton." "Wait here," she told Jenkins, hurrying toward Wyatt before the driver could protest. Wyatt turned as she approached, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Matthews." "Mr. Thornton. What brings you to the Double F?" "Business with your fiancé," he replied, his voice low. "How are you finding ranch life?" "Enlightening," she said meaningfully. "I've been learning much about Mr. Fleming and his history." Understanding flashed in Wyatt's eyes. "Be careful," he murmured. "Miss Matthews." Edward's voice rang out as he strode from the barn. "I wasn't aware you'd returned." "Just now," she replied, stepping away from Wyatt. Edward's gaze moved between them. "I see you've met Thornton." "Actually, we encountered each other on the journey here," Zara explained. "Mr. Thornton was kind enough to ride alongside the stagecoach after the storm." Edward's jaw tightened. "How fortunate. Thornton, we're finished here. I'll consider your offer, but don't expect an answer soon." Wyatt nodded, his expression unreadable. "Miss Matthews," he said, touching his hat brim. "Best wishes for your wedding." As he turned to go, he added quietly, "Remember what I said about choices." Edward watched him ride away, then turned to Zara. "I prefer you keep your distance from Thornton. We have a complicated history. He mentioned he worked for you," Zara said as they walked toward the house. "Until he tried to turn my men against me," Edward replied coldly. "Thornton has his own ideas about how things should be run. Ideas that would have ruined this ranch." That night, Zara lay awake, Mrs. Baxter's warnings echoing in her mind alongside Wyatt's parting words about choices. What choice did she have, really? No money, no family, nowhere to go. Edward Fleming offered security, if not happiness. And yet, the thought of binding herself to him filled her with growing dread. Saturday dawned clear and bright, mockingly beautiful for a day Zara had come to view with apprehension. Mrs. Porter helped her dress in her best gown, a dove-gray silk that had belonged to her mother, hastily altered for the occasion. "You look lovely, miss," the housekeeper said, arranging Zara's auburn hair. "Mr. Fleming will be pleased." Zara stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the pale, solemn-faced woman looking back at her. "Mrs. Porter," she ventured, "were you here when Mrs. Fleming died?" "The last Mrs. Fleming?" The housekeeper's hands stilled. "I was." "What was she like?" Mrs. Porter resumed her work with the hairpins. "Elizabeth was young like you. Pretty. High-spirited at first." "At first? Mr. Fleming doesn't tolerate disobedience," she said matter-of-factly. "Elizabeth learned that the hard way." A chill ran through Zara. "The accident. Was it really an accident?" Mrs. Porter met her eyes in the mirror. "It's not my place to say, miss. But if you're having doubts." She glanced at the door. "There's still time to leave." "And go where?" Zara whispered. The housekeeper's eyes softened momentarily. "Anywhere would be better then." She broke off as footsteps sounded in the hallway. "I've said too much?" "God help you, child." At precisely 1:30, Edward knocked on her door. He was dressed in a formal black suit, his beard freshly trimmed, looking every inch the successful rancher. "You look appropriate," he said, which seemed to be his highest form of compliment. "The Reverend has arrived. Shall we proceed?" As they descended the stairs, Zara felt as though she were walking to her doom rather than her wedding. The parlor had been arranged with a few chairs for the witnesses, Mr. Knowles, Mrs. Porter, and 2 ranch hands. Reverend Simmons waited before the fireplace, Bible in hand. "Before we begin," Edward said, "I have a document requiring your signature." He nodded to Knowles, who produced a multi-page legal paper. "What is this?" Zara asked, taking it. "A marriage contract," Edward explained. "It stipulates that all property remains solely in my name, including any improvements or acquisitions during our marriage. In the event of my death, you would receive a stipend, with the ranch passing to any male heirs, or to my cousin in Boston if we have none." Zara stared at the document, then at Edward. "This offers me no protection whatsoever." His expression hardened. "It offers you the protection of my name and home, which is more than you had when you arrived. Sign it, Zara. The Reverend is waiting." Her hand trembled as she took the pen Knowles offered. This was it, the moment of truth. Sign, and bind herself to this cold, controlling man, or refuse, and face an uncertain future alone. Wyatt's words echoed in her mind. "There's always a choice." She set the pen down. "No." Edward's eyebrows rose. "I beg your pardon?" "I said no," Zara repeated, her voice stronger. "I won't sign this, and I won't marry you." The room went deathly quiet. Edward's face flushed dark with anger. "You agreed to this marriage. Arrangements have been made." "Arrangements can be unmade," she countered, backing toward the door. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but I cannot bind myself to a man who views me as property rather than a partner." "You ungrateful!" Edward started forward, but Reverend Simmons stepped between them. "Mr. Fleming," the minister said, his voice shaking but determined, "I cannot in good conscience perform this ceremony if the lady is unwilling." Edward's glare could have melted steel. "Get out, all of you! Except you," he added, pointing at Zara. "You and I need to discuss your breach of contract." As the others filed out nervously, Zara's heart pounded. She was alone with a man whose anger was palpable, a man suspected of causing his previous wife's death. "Mr. Fleming," she began, trying to keep her voice steady, "I apologize for the public nature of this, but my decision is final." He advanced on her slowly. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me? The time, the expense, the reputation? I understand you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to describe it." he snarled, closing the distance between them. No woman humiliates Edward Fleming and simply walks away. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with bruising force. Zara cried out in pain. Let her go, Fleming. They both turned to see Wyatt Thornton standing in the doorway, his stance wide and ready, hand hovering near the pistol at his hip. Edward's grip tightened. This is none of your concern, Thornton. Get off my property. I'm making it my concern, Wyatt replied evenly. The lady's made her choice. Let her go. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, with a disgusted sound, Edward released Zara's wrist, shoving her away from him. Take her then, he spat. She's not worth the trouble. But know this, he pointed at Zara. You leave with nothing but the clothes on your back. And you, he turned to Wyatt. You'll regret crossing me again. Wyatt held out his hand to Zara. Come on. My horse is outside. Without looking back, Zara hurried to his side. They crossed the foyer and stepped out onto the porch, where Wyatt's chestnut stallion waited, along with several bewildered onlookers, including Mrs. Porter. My things, Zara began, but Wyatt shook his head. Not worth risking going back for them. I'll buy you what you need in town. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. As they rode away from the Double F, Zara felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. She had just burned her only bridge, rejected her only security, and yet she'd never felt more right about a decision. Where are we going? She asked as they put distance between themselves and the ranch. To town first, Wyatt replied, his arms secure around her as he held the reins. You'll need some essentials. Then to my place if that suits you. I've got a spare room where you can stay until you decide what you want to do. They rode in silence for a while, the reality of her situation slowly sinking in. Finally Zara said, Why did you come back to the ranch today? Wyatt was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. I couldn't let you go through with it, he finally said. Not knowing what I know about Fleming. What do you know? She pressed. His arms tightened slightly around her. I was there when Elizabeth died. It wasn't an accident. Fleming beat her for speaking to one of the hands, beat her so badly she couldn't get up for days. When she finally could, she tried to run. He caught her by the river. No one saw exactly what happened, but he took a deep breath. I found her body downstream the next morning. Zara gasped. Why wasn't he arrested? No proof. The doctor was in his pocket. Called it an accidental drowning. Bitterness laced his words. That's when I quit. Couldn't stomach working for him anymore. They reached Silver Creek as afternoon shadows lengthened. Wyatt took her to Mrs. Baxter's store, where the shopkeeper's eyes widened at the sight of them. Miss Matthews. What on earth? There was no wedding. Zara explained simply. I need some basic necessities. Understanding dawned in Mrs. Baxter's kind face. Of course, my dear. Let's see what we can find. An hour later, Zara had a small bundle of essential clothing and toiletries. Wyatt insisted on paying despite her protests. You can work it off if you're determined, he told her with a hint of a smile. I'm in dire need of someone who can cook better than I can. As they prepared to leave town, a commotion at the far end of the street drew their attention. 3 riders were approaching at a gallop, Edward Fleming and 2 of his men. Trouble, Wyatt muttered, pulling Zara into the alley beside the store. Fleming's not one to let things go. What do we do? Zara whispered, fear gripping her. Wyatt peered around the corner. My horse is tied out front. Too risky to try for him now. He looked around the alley, thinking quickly. There's a back way to the livery. If we can get there without being seen, we might borrow a horse. They slipped down the alley, keeping to the shadows of the buildings. Shouts echoed from the main street as Fleming and his men searched for them. The livery stable was deserted except for an old man dozing in a chair. Wyatt roused him gently. Amos, I need a favor. The old man blinked awake. Wyatt? What's the rush? Need to borrow a horse. Fleming's on the warpath. Understanding flashed in Amos's rheumy eyes. Take the gray mare in the last stall. She's fast and quiet. I'll bring her back tomorrow, Wyatt promised, already moving to saddle the horse. Don't bother, Amos replied, glancing at Zara. Consider her a wedding gift, just not for the groom Fleming had in mind. Minutes later, they were riding double on the gray mare, taking a back trail out of town that would eventually lead to Wyatt's ranch. The sound of pursuit faded behind them as they entered the forest that covered the foothills. Will he follow us to your ranch? Zara asked, clinging to Wyatt as the horse navigated the narrow trail. Maybe, but he'll be at a disadvantage there. I know every inch of my land, and I've got good neighbors who don't care for Fleming's methods. As dusk settled over the mountains, they emerged from the forest into a small, secluded valley. A modest but well-built cabin stood near a creek, with a barn and corral nearby. Several horses grazed in a fenced pasture, and smoke curled from the cabin's chimney. Someone's here, Zara said anxiously. That'll be Ben, my hired hand, Wyatt explained. He lives in a room off the barn, but he keeps the fire going when I'm away. The door opened as they approached, and a burly older man stepped out, rifle in hand. When he recognized Wyatt, he lowered the weapon. Was beginning to wonder if you'd make it back tonight, he called. Then, noticing Zara, didn't know you were bringing company. Ben, this is Miss Matthews, Wyatt said as he helped Zara down. She'll be staying with us for a while. Miss Matthews, this is Ben Hawkins, the best ranch hand in Colorado. Ben touched his hat respectfully. Madam. Wasn't expecting a lady, but the spare room's clean enough. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and 2 doors leading to what Zara assumed were bedrooms. Everything was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's dwelling. It's not much compared to Fleming's place, Wyatt said, watching her take in her surroundings. It's perfect, she replied sincerely. Truly. Ben brought in her small bundle of purchases and a basin of hot water. Thought you might want to wash up. I'll see to the horses. After he'd gone, Wyatt showed her to the spare room, small but clean, with a narrow bed, chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the creek. Rest if you'd like, he said. I'll fix something to eat. Left alone, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the day catching up to her. She'd left behind everything familiar, rejected security for uncertainty, and placed her trust in a man she barely knew. And yet, for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt something like peace. Dinner was a simple affair of beans, bacon, and biscuits that Wyatt apologized for repeatedly. I warned you about my cooking, he said with a rueful smile. It's delicious, Zara insisted, realizing she was genuinely hungry for the first time in days. And made all the better by the company. Over the meal, Wyatt told her more about his ranch, 300 acres, 30 head of cattle, and plans to expand once he secured water rights to the north pasture. It's modest compared to the Double F, he acknowledged. But it's mine, free and clear. How did you acquire it? She asked. Saved every penny working for Fleming and others. Bought this land from an old trapper 3 years ago. Most folks thought I was crazy, too much forest, not enough grazing land. But I've been clearing it bit by bit. It's beautiful, Zara said. Peaceful. As they cleaned up after dinner, she found herself studying him, the way his hands moved with quiet efficiency, the slight frown of concentration between his brows, the occasional smile that transformed his serious face. What will you do now? He asked suddenly, breaking her reverie. Zara considered the question. I'm not sure. I have some skills. I can read and write well, keep accounts so decently. Perhaps there's work in town. Not in Silver Creek, Wyatt said grimly. Fleming has too much influence. You'd never get hired. Then perhaps I should move on to another town, she suggested, though the thought filled her with weariness. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, Or you could stay here. Zara looked up in surprise. Here? But I couldn't impose, it's not an imposition, he interrupted. I need help with the ranch. Ben's good with the stock, but there's more to running a place than that. Books need keeping, supplies need organizing. And, he added with a hint of a smile, someone needs to cook something besides beans and bacon. Are you offering me employment, Mr. Thornton? I'm offering you a place, Miss Matthews. At least until you decide what you want. Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a possibility either was ready to name. Thank you, she said softly. I accept. For now. The next morning, Zara woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly in one of her new simple dresses and joined Wyatt in the main room. Sleep well? He asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. Better than I have in weeks, she admitted. What's the plan for today? Ben and I need to check the north fence line. Thought you might like to familiarize yourself with the house, maybe take inventory of what supplies we need. Town's off limits for now, until we see how Fleming reacts. After breakfast, Wyatt showed her around the property, the vegetable garden behind the cabin, the smokehouse, the root cellar, and the spring that provided their water. It's not much, he said again, but it's enough to be getting on with. It's more than enough, Zara replied. It's a real home. Over the next few days, Zara settled into a routine at the rocking tea. She took over the cooking and housekeeping, organized Wyatt's haphazard accounts, and even began expanding the vegetable garden. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking about their lives before Silver Creek. Wyatt told her about growing up in Missouri, losing his parents to cholera, and drifting west as a young man. Zara shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her father's business failures, and her mother's quiet strength. She would have liked you, Zara said one evening. She always said character mattered more than circumstances. Wise woman, Wyatt replied. Explains where you get your backbone from. On the fourth day, as Zara was hanging laundry to dry, Ben rode in with news from town. Fleming's put out word he's looking for you both, he reported grimly. Offering a reward for information. Wyatt's expression darkened. What's he claiming? That Miss Matthews stole valuables before leaving, and you helped her. Nobody believes it, but his money talks. Zara's hands trembled as she pinned a shirt to the line. This is my fault. I brought trouble to your door. No, Wyatt said firmly. Fleming's the trouble, not you. And I've dealt with him before. That night, after Ben had retired to his quarters, Wyatt sat cleaning his rifle while Zara mended one of his shirts by lamplight. I should leave, she said suddenly. Take the stage from the next town over, go somewhere Fleming can't find me. Wyatt set the rifle aside. Is that what you want? No, she admitted. But I don't want to be the cause of violence either. He moved to sit beside her on the bench. Zara, he said, using her given name for the first time. Fleming and I have unfinished business that goes beyond you. It was coming to a head eventually. Because of Elizabeth? She asked softly. Wyatt nodded, his face grim in the lamplight. I should have done more to help her. I knew what was happening, but I didn't do enough. Impulsively, Zara reached for his hand. You tried. And you helped me. His fingers closed around hers, warm and rough from work. I couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself. Is that the only reason you came for me? She asked, her heart beating faster. Because of what happened before. Wyatt looked at her, really looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the lamplight. No, he said simply. That's not the only reason. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, Wyatt raised his free hand to touch her cheek. I've known you less than 2 weeks, he murmured, but I can't imagine this place without you now. Zara leaned into his touch. I came west to marry a stranger, she whispered. Just not the one I expected. Wyatt smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face. Gently, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a question, not a demand. Zara answered by sliding her hand to his shoulder and returning the kiss, sweet and tentative at first, then with growing certainty. When they finally pulled apart, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably take this slow," he said, his voice husky. "Probably," she agreed, though her heart disagreed vehemently. He kissed her once more, briefly, then stood. "Good night, Zara Matthews." "Good night, Wyatt Thornton." A week passed with no sign of Fleming or his men. Life at the rocking tee fell into a comfortable rhythm, with Zara taking on more responsibilities and growing more confident in her place there. The connection between her and Wyatt deepened, expressed in shared glances, lingering touches, and moments stolen throughout the day. Then, early one morning, Ben burst into the cabin. "Riders coming. Looks like Fleming and at least 4 men. Wyatt was instantly alert, reaching for his rifle. "How far out?" "Maybe 10 minutes. Coming up the main trail. Get the horses ready in case we need to run," Wyatt instructed. "Zara, gather only what you can't leave behind." As Ben hurried out, Zara turned to Wyatt. "I won't run this time," she said firmly. "This is my home now too, and I won't be chased from it." Wyatt looked like he wanted to argue, but instead nodded. "Stay inside, away from the windows." He took up position on the porch, rifle ready but not raised. Zara watched through a gap in the curtains as 5 riders approached across the meadow, Edward Fleming in the lead. They stopped about 50 yards from the cabin. Fleming called out, "Thornton! Send out the woman and we'll go peacefully." "She's not property to be sent anywhere, Fleming," Wyatt replied. "State your business and be on your way." Fleming dismounted, signaling his men to remain on horseback. "That woman broke a contract and stole from me. I have every right to reclaim what's mine." "I stole nothing," Zara called, stepping onto the porch despite Wyatt's warning glance. Fleming's face twisted with anger. "There you are, you ungrateful, careful," Wyatt interrupted, raising his rifle slightly. "You're on my land now, Fleming. Different rules here." Fleming studied the situation, eyes calculating. "You think you can stand against me, Thornton? I built this valley. One word from me, and you'll never sell another head of cattle in this territory." "Maybe," Wyatt acknowledged. "But you'll still be in the wrong, and folks will know it." "Folks only know what I tell them to know," Fleming sneered. At that moment, hoofbeats sounded from the far side of the property. 3 riders appeared, Sheriff Davis from Silver Creek, accompanied by Mrs. Baxter's husband and another man Zara didn't recognize. "What's going on here, Fleming?" the sheriff demanded, reining in his horse. "Looks like you're about to start trouble on Thornton's land." Fleming turned, momentarily thrown off balance. "Sheriff, I'm simply recovering stolen property and a woman who broke a legal agreement." "That's so?" The sheriff looked to Zara. "Miss Matthews, did you steal from Mr. Fleming?" "No, Sheriff," she replied clearly. "I brought nothing but the clothes I wore. Mr. Fleming is angry because I refused to sign his marriage contract and marry him." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "And this contract, was it signed?" "No," Fleming admitted reluctantly. "Then there's no legal agreement broken," the sheriff concluded. "As for stolen property, without proof, there's nothing I can do." "This is outrageous," Fleming sputtered. "She was brought west at my expense. A gift is a gift, Fleming," the sheriff interrupted. "Can't demand it back when you don't get your way." He turned to his companions. "Mr. Baxter here says his wife is concerned for Miss Matthews' safety, given your history with previous arrangements." Something dangerous flashed in Fleming's eyes. "You're overstepping, Davis." "Am I?" The sheriff's hand rested casually near his pistol. "Seems to me you're the one trespassing with armed men. Now I suggest you turn around and head back to your ranch before this becomes an official matter." For a tense moment, it seemed Fleming might challenge the sheriff. Then, with a curt nod to his men, he remounted his horse. "This isn't over, Thornton," he called. Not by a long shot. They watched as Fleming and his men rode away, tension vibrating in the air until they disappeared over the ridge. The sheriff dismounted with a sigh. That man's been trouble since he first came to this valley, but his money talks. He tipped his hat to Zara. Miss Matthews, Mrs. Baxter's been worried sick about you. Asked me to check if you're here of your own free will. I am, Sheriff, Zara confirmed. Mr. Thornton has been nothing but a gentleman. The sheriff nodded, seemingly satisfied. Well, Fleming's going to be nursing his grudge for a while. Might be best if you two keep a low profile. After the sheriff and his companions departed, Wyatt pulled Zara into a tight embrace. I thought for sure that was going to end badly. She clung to him, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against her cheek. What happens now? Wyatt stepped back just enough to look into her eyes. Now we live our lives and build something that's ours. If that's what you want. It is, she whispered. More than anything. The following Sunday, they rode into Silver Creek for church services, their first public appearance together since the confrontation. Heads turned as they entered the small church, whispers following in their wake. Reverend Simmons greeted them warmly, though his eyes held concern. Fleming's not here today, he murmured. But be careful nonetheless. After the service, Mrs. Baxter hurried over to embrace Zara. My dear, I've been so worried. Are you truly all right? Better than all right, Zara assured her, glancing at Wyatt with a smile. I've found where I belong. Mrs. Baxter's eyes twinkled with understanding. I can see that. And it suits you both. Over the next few weeks, the tension gradually eased. Fleming kept to his ranch, and while there were occasional reports of him making threats when drinking, he took no further action against them. Life at the Rocking Tea blossomed with Zara's presence. The cabin became a true home, with curtains at the windows, wildflowers on the table, and the scent of home-cooked meals replacing the bachelor simplicity of before. Wyatt's business prospered under her organized bookkeeping, and he was able to purchase additional cattle from a rancher moving to California. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Wyatt took Zara's hand. I've been thinking, he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. This arrangement we have you staying here, helping with the ranch, it works well. It does, she agreed, wondering where he was heading. But it's not official. He paused, struggling for words. What I mean to say is, there's talk in town. About us. Zara smiled. There's always talk in small towns. Yes, but... Wyatt stood up abruptly, then knelt before her, still holding her hand. Zara Matthews, I'm not a wealthy man like Fleming. I can't offer you a mansion or fine dresses. But I can offer you my heart, my name, and everything I am or ever will be. He swallowed hard. Will you marry me? Not because you need security or protection, but because if I'm fortunate beyond deserving, you might love me as I love you. Tears sprang to Zara's eyes as joy bloomed in her chest. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Wyatt Thornton, I will marry you. Because I do love you with all my heart. He gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes. When they finally parted, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. It was my mother's, he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. I've been carrying it since the day you decided to stay. Their wedding 2 weeks later was everything her almost wedding to Fleming had not been: joyful, genuine, and surrounded by the friends they'd made in Silver Creek. Mrs. Baxter helped Zara sew a new dress of pale blue silk, and Ben stood proudly as Wyatt's best man. Reverend Simmons beamed as he pronounced them husband and wife, his voice carrying clearly through the small church. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. At the small reception at Mrs. Baxter's home, Sheriff Davis approached them with a surprising piece of news. Thought you'd want to know Fleming's selling the double F, moving back east, they say. Wyatt's eyebrows rose. After all these years? What brought that on? The sheriff shrugged. Pride's a powerful thing. Lost face when he couldn't get his way with Mrs. Thornton here. Then lost a big army contract to a rancher from Wyoming. Word is, he's had enough of the frontier. As they rode home that evening, now husband and wife, Zara leaned back against Wyatt's chest, content in a way she'd never imagined possible when she first boarded that stagecoach in Boston. "What are you thinking?" Wyatt asked, his arms secure around her. "About choices," she replied. "When I left Boston, I thought I had none. I was bound for a man I'd never met, with my future decided for me. And now?" She turned slightly to look up at him. "Now I know better. There's always a choice, even when it seems impossible. I'm grateful every day that I found the courage to make mine." Wyatt smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "So am I. Every day for the rest of our lives." 6 months later, on a crisp winter morning, Zara stood at the window of their cabin, watching snowflakes drift lazily onto the frozen landscape. Wyatt's arms slipped around her from behind, his hands coming to rest gently on her slightly rounded belly. "How are you feeling?" he murmured against her hair. "Wonderful," she replied, covering his hands with her own. "Though your son or daughter seems determined to keep me awake at night. Already strong-willed, like their mother." Wyatt chuckled. Zara turned in his arms. "I had a letter from Mrs. Baxter yesterday. The new owners have moved into the double FA family with 3 young children. She says they're nothing like Fleming." "Good," Wyatt said simply. "This valley deserves better." As they stood together, watching the snow transform their land into a glistening wonderland, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had traveled west to marry a stranger, only to find love where she least expected it, with a cowboy who had asked one simple, life-changing question. "What if you stayed?" And in staying, she had found not just a home, but a future filled with love, purpose, and the family they were building together. The path hadn't been easy, but as Wyatt had taught her, the most worthwhile journeys rarely were. In the quiet of their home, with the promise of spring waiting beneath the snow and new life growing within her, Zara Thornton knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. This was where she belonged, not bound by obligation or necessity, but held by love, chosen freely and given fully in return.